Hi, I'm Shane Heron, creator of Morris. I'm one of the co-creators of Cauldron Magazine, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book and graphic novel creators and supporters. I'm John Swinimer. On this episode, I chat with Shane Heron as he prepares to showcase his various comic book projects at Toronto Comicon 2024. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. Toronto Comicon is a spectacular 3-day sci-fi, horror, anime, gaming, and comic book event in Canada that attracts thousands of people to come to the Metro Toronto Convention Centre. Based in Toronto, Shane Heron is a freelance illustrator, cartoonist, and painter. He's the creator of Morris, a post-apocalyptic Western comic book. Shane is also the writer and co-creator of Black Hole Hunters Club with Ricky Lima. Shane's also a contributor and co-creator of Cauldron Magazine. Shane's lending his talents to Auric, along with creator Davis Dewsbury and artist Andrew Thomas, plus a cavalcade of other creators. The post-apocalyptic Western comic book Morris is set in a very dangerous world. There is safe oasis, the town of Beatrice, which is protected by Sheriff Morris and his deputies. Morris is a tough-as-nails sheriff who will stop at nothing to protect his town in a dangerous post-apocalyptic world. So without further ado, here's my chat with Shane Heron as he prepares to showcase his various comic book projects at Toronto Comicon 2024. So Shane Heron, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
Well, thanks for having me back, John. It's been a while.
It has. I apologize about that, but I do appreciate your time, that's for sure. And before I get to all the questions, I'd like to know, what are you reading today? What's on your bedside reading table?
I'm reading a few different things. Comic book wise, I'm doing the Transformers, the Daniel Warren Johnson book, which is anything by Daniel Warren Johnson. I'm in totally. He's amazing. Everything he does is great. I got some of the Darth Vader books that Adam Gorham is drawing, which is pretty good stuff. And Adam's one of my favorite artists, so always good to see his stuff. And I'm actually just rereading one of my favorite books, novel-wise, just Catch-22, which every time I read it, I just love it so much. So I'm just going through a reread of that.
Yeah, that's great. There's always like one book, whether it be a graphic novel or book, that we go back to just because it's like one of those sort of comfort foods, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I think Catch-22 might be my favorite book of all time. So every time I reread it, it's like just always just as entertaining as the first time, in my opinion.
Great. Well, we're talking today because you're going to be tabling at Toronto Comicon 2024. So with that in mind, I want to get, what is it that you admire most about going to conventions? What's the most favorite thing that you like?
I don't love going to conventions. I'm usually people who know me know I like to complain a lot. I'm actually like I do like going to shows, but I feel like I guess the best part is seeing people that sometimes there's certain people you see only at shows, other artists, other creators. Sometimes it's just certain fans or people going and working at the show. It's good to see those people, but I always find conventions sort of a little bit hectic because, I mean, you're there. Everyone I know thinks I'm there just having a blast. They think people who don't know comic book artists and stuff like that, they just think you're there in like cosplay running around, and they don't realize that for us, it's like you're working. You're there. You're pretty much working the whole time, and then everyone wants to go out later and have drinks and stuff like that, and you're like, it's a full weekend usually, especially like Fan Expo is 4 days. It's a lot. So I just like seeing people that I haven't seen in a while, but generally I'm actually pretty miserable.
Oh my! Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Hopefully, this one will be better for you. Well,
no, they're always. I've been doing them for years. It's never. I'm always going to be miserable, and I'm always going to complain. But that's kind of fun too. I like complaining. That's part of my.
Okay.
Well,
I've got to ask you. There must have been like at least one occasion where you had a memorable moment, whether it was someone you met or a famous person that you admired. It had to be one moment that you liked most.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm there's been a lot of good moments. I do love doing sketch battles.
Oh yes, right. Yeah.
Or whatever they're called now. The last one, I always forget things, but there's a last time I did, I think it was Fan Expo. I did a Sketchelmania, Martin Slam Duncan Sketchelmania. It was like Mike Ruth, Sean Daly, and Becca Kinsey, who are just three of my favorite creators to do, and to be on a stage with them doing Martin's show it was just fun. It's a fun time. Anytime you go on stage with like Mike Ruth, he just loves to tell, stories about old wrestlers or something like that. So those type of things are always my favorite thing to do. But most of the time it's just like hanging out at the con with, I'm with the Raid studio. So the Raid guys, some of them are not always in studio and they're from out of town. So it's, you get to spend the weekend with them, but I can't think of anything specific. I'm sure it'll come to me later of like, a really crazy fun story or something like that from a show.
Well, those are good moments, though, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you'll be tabling at the show. So I'm wondering if you could talk a wee bit about what you'll be showcasing. What will be on your table?
So I don't think I have a whole lot of new stuff right now. I'll be selling, Ricky Lima he's been doing a Kickboxer book where he's literally just illustrating the movie Kickboxer, the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. I think it's going to be a 6-issue series. I think he's just went to print on issue 3. For the first issue, I did a variant cover, a Tong Po. I don't know if you remember. Do you remember Kickboxer, the Van Damme movie?
Yeah. In fact, he was showing it to me when he was at the Artsy Fartsy convention.
Oh, yeah.
Really cool.
Okay, so I asked him if it hasn't worked out, but I told him every issue I want to do a Tong Po variant. Just draw a Tong Po all the time. So the first issue I did a Tong Po, and I have a bunch of my version that I'll be selling there. And I haven't done it for the next 2 issues, but I'm sure I'll be doing another issue of Tong Po variant for Ricky, because that's all I want to draw for Kickboxer. So I'll have that book. I still have some cauldrons we're working on, and I have Dracula, Martin Slam Press's Dracula. I have those I'm selling as well. I don't think I'll be selling Frankenstein's eventually, the new book, but I don't think it'll be ready for the March Comicon. So I don't think I'll have that. To be honest, this show I don't have a ton of new stuff, but I'd say come Fan Expo, we're gonna have a lot of new books.
Sounds good. Now, speaking of that, do you have any other projects on the go that you can talk about right now that people can look forward to?
Yeah, so right now, I don't know if this will be currently a Kickstarter is up right now for Cauldron's hardcover. I'm not sure when this will go up. It might be finished by then, but we have that going strong on Kickstarter right now. The Cauldron Forbidden Appetites hardcover. It's a sort of a best of collection of the previous issues with some new material designed by Ramon from Raid Press, Ramon Perez, his book's design is just incredible. The book looks amazing. It's got an amazing Kalman Andrzejowski cover. So that will be out soon. That's being Kickstarted right now. It'll probably be done by the time this comes up, I think. But also we have a new Raid anthology. I think they're going to be kickstarting it in May. So I'm contributing a story to one of the new Raid anthologies. Soon after that, we'll have another Cauldron issue coming out. And I'm currently working on my own book, Morris, which I'm well behind on my new story.
Oh, well, lots of good stuff on the go. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, typically at these shows, you get a lot of people come up to your table. So one of you could just imagine someone coming up and asking you for a piece of advice, and they want to make their own comic book for the first time. What sort of advice would you give to that person?
Yeah, we get this a lot. And one thing I find is a very common thing with people that want to get started in doing a comic or a graphic novel is that everyone's got these sort of like Lord of the Rings epics that they want to do. And they want to, they don't know where to start. And it becomes this gargantuan 1,000-page story that they want to tell, but it's their first book. And so I always try to tell people, like, start doing short stories. Just do, even if they're little stories that add up to a bigger picture that you could collect all together as one story, but do smaller stuff, because the first ones you do, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. Everyone does it. My first books were awful. I slowly got better over the years doing them, and just kind of work out the kinks and get better and stronger at storytelling or whatever you need to do. And then you can slowly get to those bigger projects, but just practice doing some shorter stories, different styles, different, artistic styles. I don't know, something like that, just to try and get practice just making and publishing a book, because that's the hardest part, is just doing your first sort of books. And then a lot of people, I find they're waiting for this sort of perfect time to show the world their new epic story that they're going to do. And it's like, there's no perfect time. Just start doing it. Start doing it now and start making the mistakes now so that you can get them out and get better and stronger. And I guess it sounds cliche, but the best advice is like, just do it, just start making that story.
Yeah, no, that's not cliche. That's actually very wise advice. That's it for sure. Now, I should have asked you this before, but with all your projects you have on the go, I wanted to ask you, what is your go-to tool for creating art these days?
I have a few different, I still work pretty much traditionally. I do a little bit of stuff digitally, but most of it is traditional pen and ink. And people think I'm crazy because most artists use a softer lead, but the leads I like to use are like a 5H, 4H, 5H, 6H pencil lead, which are very hard and very light on the page. A lot of artists think it's like drawing with like a diamond. So not many people do it, but that's, for some reason, that's always been the pencils I go to, just like a hard 4H or higher. And then I like to ink with just I use a Pentel ink brush. I think it's called it might be called the pocket brush or something like that. And it's got the handle, has refillable inks in it. If I'm not using that, I'll use a Speedball ink and then like a Winsor Newton Series 7 sable brush, which are like probably the nicest brushes you can get. I got a bunch of those, and that seems to be the best tool, I think, for inking. Yeah, and then I just sometimes I'll use a mix of watercolors or Winsor Newton colored inks to do colored stuff like that, like watercolor, or I don't know what you call it when you water down, watery ink color, something like that. So.
Sure. Yeah, there's definitely a different sort of reward, I guess you could say, when you're getting a tactile feel using traditional tools versus digital. I find that a lot of artists have found that. Is that reason why you stick with the traditional tools?
Yeah, I really like having a piece of paper, and I love using black ink on paper. It just feels so nice. And also, I don't know, I've done finished artwork digitally, doesn't really feel that nice to me, but I like doing rough stuff digitally, just sort of sketches, thumbnails, layouts, that type of thing. But for the actual finished piece, I like to print it out and ink it and there's something really nice about feeling, which is very old school, and to become even less more so, because I think all the guys at the studio here, I think there's only a handful that actually work traditionally. Most people are working digitally because it's faster and it's more efficient.
Right. Well,
the way of the future.
Progress sometimes isn't for the best. We found that out the hard way. Oh my. Well, with all that you've got on the go, I'm wondering where you recommend people go to find out about your current and your future projects online.
I always just tell people Instagram at Shane Heron, ShaneHeron. That's pretty much anything I'm working on. I'm going to post in my stories or my bio there. I don't really have a lot of, like, I do Facebook, but I rarely post anything there anymore. I'm not really very active anymore on social media other than Instagram. So that would be the one to go to.
Thanks to Shane for the chat. You can discover more about Shane on Instagram at Shane Heron. And thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And remember to check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website. True North Country Comics is on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel and hit the notification button. Remember, you can follow at True North Country Comics on most social media sites. And you can send any and all feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2024.